Hello and welcome to this virtual session. We're glad you can join us today. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items we'd like to go over with you now. Firstly, you can resize the webinar windows to cater to your viewing preferences. You can maximise, minimise and drag the windows to your preferred viewing size. If you look at the bottom middle of your screen, you can click on the widgets that you'll need to get the most out of this virtual experience. Secondly, Microsoft specialists are on hand to answer your questions in real time. So feel free to type in your questions using the Q&A window and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Lastly, we've provided some additional resources for you to supplement your learning. You can access them by clicking on the links in this section. Without further ado, I'll hand over to our speakers.
Hello there! I'm so happy to see you back here for part 2 of our virtual training days on Microsoft Dynamics 365 Fundamentals. And we're going to continue to focus on the customer engagement apps, or also known as the CRM. In our first session, we explored the customer journey, and we went through the sales process and ultimately how to take that lead and convert it to an opportunity, to an order, and we looked at all the different ways that Dynamics 365 can help with that process. Today, what I want to do is I want to pick up where we left off and look at what happens after your customers purchase a product or a service. What happens if they need help resolving an issue? Or what if their order included a maintenance service plan? Today, what we'll be looking at is the customer service and field modules inside of Dynamics 365. We're also going to wrap up the day exploring the project operations module, which is great if your organization is offering project-based services. And this may sound like a lot, but we're going to go through all of it together. And I do highly recommend that you leverage the learning path for this class. And you can find that at aka.ms/mb910. So let's go ahead and actually get started with our first module of the day. Dynamics 365 for customer service. But before we get started, we want to look at all the different customer service tools inside of Dynamics. And while that's great, I want to make sure you understand what customer service is. Because in part 1, we look at how you convince a customer to buy a product or your service. But when it comes to customer service, it's the assistance or the advice that you're providing your customers based off of the products and services that they purchase. And so when we break it down, there are 4 main factors driving the customer support. If this is the first time that your customers are reaching out, you don't want your customers to have to spend all day on hold or waiting weeks for an email response on the issue. They're going to want a rapid response. And they also want to be able to search for their own solutions when possible. So let's say, for example, it's as simple as a reboot. They're not going to want to have to submit a ticket or wait for a call just for someone to say turn it off and turn it back on. So maybe you set something up like a knowledge base or a frequently asked questions. Your customers are going to want some type of self-service element in their support. When it does come, to what customers need when they are contacting your team, they're going to want to do it in an easy way. Now, customers would much rather send a text message or maybe send an email instead of calling it in. And so you need to have some type of omni-channel experience for your customers. And this allows your team to be more accessible and remove some of the stress from that customer service interaction. And, customers' needs are going to vary from industry to industry. The best customer service organizations, they're using feedback collected from their customers to help identify the needs and, create personalized solutions for their customer base. And organizations that really excel at providing customer service, they usually have all 4 of these factors built into their process to create a customer service solution. And today, what we're going to be looking at is how Dynamics 365 Customer Service helps you and your team meet the needs of your customers by addressing these 4 factors and providing tools to help manage caseloads, generate service-related activities, and ultimately find the best resolution to your customer's problem. And As we look at all of these other modules inside Dynamics, customer service is also going to have different components that work together to create a solution. But because this is a fundamentals course, I want to take some time and actually review some common terminology that you'll see when working inside of the customer service module. First, we have a case. This is some type of request made by your customer. And cases are going to require some type of resolution, or think of it like an answer. So when your agents are working on finding resolutions, they're going to be logging all of the activities that they do related to the case. Any emails or calls between the customer and your reps are considered an activity. Then what we have are entitlements. This is when a customer purchases a product or a service. Sometimes there's a level of support included in the purchase. Kind of think of this like a support contract. And so when it comes to resolving a case for a customer, that entitlement is really going to indicate the service level agreement, like a response or resolution times. And in order to meet those needs, it's helpful if your representatives have access to documentation that explains all these different solutions to some of the common issues they might come up against. And this can really cut down on the research time and can help resolve cases faster. Now, I do want to mention that your customer service reps probably won't be working on a single case at a time. And as a result, it can be very overwhelming to document every single activity. But with the creation of rules, like let's say, for example, if a customer logs that they are prompted, for an update, or an activity of turning the system on and off afterwards, well, you can have all of those different tasks and activities automatically go into that service ticket so your reps aren't having to enter it. And then finally, what we have our routing rules. Now, these are rules that are applied to cases that automatically route a case to a specific queue or user. This ensures that the best qualified rep is going to be added to the case first, instead of having your customer transfer from department to rep to rep. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look how all of these can come together as part of what we call the case lifecycle. So as we actually start to explore Dynamics 365 customer service, which makes it easier for your whole team to work on and manage large caseloads. But we're also going to look how it can allow your users to work on any device. And where we see this being a huge benefit is when it comes to the dashboards. These dashboards, they're designed to make it easy for your customer service agents to locate work and work with any type of service-related data. And you can set up different visual filters, and it makes it really easy to pare down the data displayed through all of the different interactive charts. And then your agents, they can drill down into those charts and really find the most appropriate case for them to work on. But in addition to the dashboards, Dynamics 365 customer service help service agents with a wide array of tools, and they're designed to help take control of the case management and resolve your customers' issues faster. So, we talk about life cycles in part 1. I want to start with the case life cycle. So the way it always starts is with a customer raising an issue, or what we call a case. In the past, customers are going to be limited to a customer support line. But oh boy, how things have changed. So customers absolutely can still call in. But they do also have the option to submit a case through like a website web chat, or they can send a text, or you can even submit a case through social media now. Depending on how you set up your process, cases can be created manually by an agent, as those different requests come in, or you can have those cases automatically be created, like when it's triggered from something like a secondary application. But what happens is after that case is loaded into the system, it needs to be routed to the agent best suited to help resolve it. However, that route can differ drastically, from one organization to another. In fact, They can even differ from a customer to customer in the same organization. You might be saying, what? But, before we get to that, let's just start with the basics of routing. So if you have a customer who opens a case about product A, you can have that case automatically routed to an agent who is certified on product A. And by doing so, you're actually streamlining the process by ensuring a qualified agent is working on that case. But where it gets, where you can make some changes is that these routes can be configured in a way to support those customer entitlements. So let's say you have a customer that has a gold tier support plan and they call in to open a case. And since they're gold tier, their case is going to be prioritized over all the other tiers, and they're going to be directed to an agent immediately. And so when we have that agent who picks up the gold tier case, it's now been added to that agent's queue, and they're going to start working on a resolution. Now, while they're working on the case, they may need to reference a knowledge base or find an article on how to troubleshoot the issue. Inside of Dynamics 365 Customer Service, there are different tools to create, manage, use, share all sorts of different organizational knowledge and information. And the goal of any knowledge management solution is to make the best use of information to ensure that it's easy for your reps to consume. And because of this allows your agents to share information in a centralized way. And it can help cut down on the time it takes to find a resolution to a customer's issue. And here's the thing, it's actually pretty easy to do. All you really have to do to write an article is actually write it. You then submit it to review, and then depending on your flow in your organization, it gets approved. And then once it's added to the knowledge base, it can be searched and used by others. And so what I want to do right now is I actually just want to show you how easy it is to actually create a knowledge article. So I am actually logged into the Customer Service Hub application inside of Dynamics. If you don't remember from yesterday, to get here, all you have to do is go to office.com/apps, log in with your account, and then depending on your permissions, you're going to have access to all of the different modules inside of Dynamics. But in order to create a knowledge article, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to scroll down here on the left-hand side, and I am going to select knowledge articles. Currently, I do not have any active articles, but to create one, it's really simple. I can either create a new one or I can create a new one from a template. And since I don't have any active articles, this account that I'm in right now doesn't have any, draft or active articles, but we're actually going to publish our first one. So let's go ahead and come up here to the top, and we are going to create a new knowledge record. All right, so the first one, what we're going to do is we're going to title it. So let's title it Find Clock on Taskbar. And so the description can be add/remove clock from taskbar on the computer. And again, if you wanted to include any type of keywords or anything like that, you absolutely could include that here. So I might just say desktop, clock, notifications. So what I'm trying to do is I'm writing an article on how to add or remove a clock from my taskbar on my computer. And maybe we, as a company, the company I work for, maybe our computers ship out and the clock's not available, and it's a common issue that comes in. So I'm going to just say, for example, I'm not going to type out the full article. Notice here that you can, if you wanted to, you could use the designer tool or you could use HTML. But what I'm going to do is just say, check the system notifications. Now, normally you'd want a much better a knowledge article than this, but for the sake of the demo, I'm going to go ahead and just include that. You can see here I have all my other editing tools, but what I can do is I can go ahead and select Save. All right, and so from an authoring side, I can see that I need to make sure I have the article subject, And let's just say that it's help desk, and I'm ready to mark it for review. So I'm going to go ahead and move it to the review stage. Now, since I am a system admin, I can go ahead and approve my own article. Normally, this really wouldn't be the process that you typically take, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to select approve. I also could do a rejected, but are you sure you want to approve? I sure am. I'm going to go ahead and take it to the next stage. And do I have any product associations? I'm going to go ahead and mark that as complete. And that's just going to be like for example, if there was a specific brand of computer that I knew was having this issue, I can then assign that. But I'm going to go ahead and select finish. And I did not include an expiration date, but now my knowledge article is ready to be used. So if we actually come over here to my knowledge articles on the side, you can now see, find the clock on the taskbar. And this shows me also what version it is and how many times it's been viewed or any type of modifications. So all of this is going to be, up to date as others in my organization access my knowledge article. I can also tie this article to part of the customer service flow. So depending on the case that comes in from a customer, if they have any type of reference to missing their clock, well, it can actually automatically pull up this knowledge article, and that way the customer service rep doesn't have to do any type of research on their own. As you can see, it's a nice and easy process to create a knowledge article. But let's actually explore. I mentioned how you could use this with maybe a case and some of the other components inside of Dynamics 365. So we're going to look specifically at how you create and manage cases. Because at the end of the day, the goal when a case comes in is to resolve it. And it's important that your agents are able to tell what cases they are currently working on, or if there's been any changes to products or updates they need to be aware of. And they need to be able to easily access those knowledge bases to help find answers for your customers. But not only for your reps, your customer service managers need to be able to check in on the workflow and follow up on any incidents as needed. And so the dashboards inside of Dynamics 365 make it nice and easy to do all of that. And when it comes to building out a workflow, there's going to be a couple of different things you need to take into consideration. One is your timeline. What is your organization standard when it comes to resolving cases? Or, what existing knowledge articles are already available? Can this information be shared with customers, maybe through some sort of self-service to eliminate the need for a case? But if a case is needed and one is created, are there any type of entitlements that customer has? And this is all going to impact that process flow. So let's actually put this together and look at a full business workflow. So let's say, for example, what we have is a customer named Nancy Anderson, and she works for a company called AdventureWorks. And so what Nancy does is she calls the central dispatcher to report an issue that they're having. The dispatcher creates a phone call activity inside of Dynamics 365 for that issue. The customer support agent at your company is going to open the phone call and basically take all the contents and convert it into a case inside of Dynamics 365. And this is what we call as part of the identify stage. What the agent is then going to do is going to move us into the research stage. This is where our agent is doing any type of research and trying to find a solution. So let's say that they spend 30 minutes researching, and part of that time they're looking at the issue in a knowledge article. Well, the agent takes that article and emails Nancy. And the agent creates a task that describes what was done and how long it took. And in this case, it was 30 minutes total. And so as we move out of the research into the resolve stage, the agent's going to actually call Nancy back to make sure that the solution that they sent over works, and actually spends an additional 15 minutes with her on the phone. And Nancy says everything's great, everything's running smoothly, and so the agent closes the case. The total time for all of the activities. It's actually rolled up together to say this is how much time was spent on that particular issue. And when we add it together, that's an hour. So let's say, for example, AdventureWorks, they have an entitlement of 10 hours of customer support per month. Basically, then what we would do is we subtract an hour from that entitlement, and now that they have 9 hours remaining. But what about this? Instead of just talking through a case, let's actually go through the process of creating and managing a case inside of Dynamics 365 Customer Service. So let's go ahead and log back in. All right, so I am back in my Customer Service Hub. We're still in our knowledge article. So what we're gonna wanna actually do is come over here to our navigation bar, and we're gonna come under Service and select Cases. Now, currently you can see that I do not have any active cases, but we can go ahead and create a new one. So I'm gonna select New. And we're gonna have some information that needs to be filled in. So let's say, for example, we have item arrived without clock. Ooh, I feel like we're gonna know what to do with here. And so then for our customer, let's say, you know what, let's use AdventureWorks. That way kind of come with our same process that we looked at in that example. So I'm gonna select AdventureWorks, all right? And you can see that since we had that account, it's automatically gonna pull it in. And then I have the origin. How did that case come in? And it came in through the phone. All right, and you can see any other information that, you know, I want to include, I can, but that's all I'm gonna do for now, and I'm gonna go ahead and select Save. All right, so now you can see instead of a new case, it's turned into a phone to case process. And now what I need to do is I need to actually go through the identify stage. And so in here, I need to find a contact. And in this case, let's actually, you know what, I'm gonna see if Nancy's in here. I can't. Nope, we don't have Nancy in there. So you know what, I'm gonna actually tie in Aiden. All right, so Aiden was the contact who called in this case. So we have Aiden, and I'm gonna go ahead and move us to the next stage. So we're safe there. And so after I have the customer and I have the contact, what I can do is I can move us to the research stage. Now, in this case, you can see the total time that we've been working on here. So you can see that it's been tracking it along the ways. But if I wanted to assign this case to someone else, I could. But what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna close out of here for a moment. And now, if I scroll up to the top, you can see I have a timeline here. So this is where maybe if I wanted to put in a new activity of, let's say that I called Aiden. So I'm gonna say phone call. And in that subject line, I'm gonna say, I returned the call to Aiden. And you can see it's here. I have the phone number. Again, I'm not gonna include anything else here for the sake of the demo, but I'm gonna go ahead and save and close. And so if I was able to connect with him, I could add any notes, but once that phone call is made, I can actually mark it as complete. And I return that phone call to Aiden, and now it's time to actually start researching the problem. You know, maybe I talked with Aiden. You can see that my first response, I need to have some sort of response in 57 minutes based off of their entitlement. But let's actually do some research on how we can fix this. Now, in this case, we know that there is a knowledge article. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to go research, I could actually come over here to my knowledge articles and pull that up and, you know, get the instructions on how to add the clock to the computer. But if we actually look right here, we have all sorts of different options when it comes to building out our case. So if we wanted to just resolve the case, maybe I talked to Aiden and, you know, something does not, you know, the problem, he fixed it himself between the time that he submitted the ticket to the time that I reached out to him. I could just resolve it, and I don't necessarily need to go through all these other steps. But that's just a couple of the different things. I can create a child case, which we'll talk about in a little bit more, and I can also include all the other details on the case. So the idea here is that you're going to be able to keep all of the information for that one case in a single spot. We have all our different related records from the activities, the knowledge articles, basically anything else that, Aiden or AdventureWorks has let us know. So let's say that I was able to get through my research, and now I can move on to the next stage of resolution. And, maybe I'm in the resolve stage, and let's go ahead and add a task. And I can say my task was showed Aiden how to change system notifications. And there we go. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and save and close. I've completed that task. And then I can go ahead and resolve that case. So now what happens, it shows that this case was completed in 4 minutes. So if you do have any type of entitlements or service level agreements with your customers, everything's going to be tracked. And it also, in case you have any KPIs for your customer service agents. And as you can see, it's relatively simple to create and manage the resolution of a case record using Dynamics 365 Customer Service. But it is important to understand that there's more than just finding a solution to the problem. We want to make sure that we're meeting those contractual obligations when it comes to support. In this case, we did it in 4 minutes. But when we look at a typical support agreement, essentially this is whether you are saying a customer is entitled to a specific time period, a specific amount, it's going to vary. But let's say, for example, we have that customer who is entitled to 10 hours of phone support over, let's say, a 6-month period, or maybe they have up to 15 cases over a period of time related to a specific product. But all these different ways that organizations measure success when it comes to their customer service response and resolution times, it's going to vary. We can base things on like who is reporting the issue or, the different issue types or the different times based on the product type. So let's say, for example, you have a customer who has a support agreement with your organization. Maybe they are going to be promised a faster response time than someone who doesn't have that support agreement. And Dynamics has 2 different ways of tracking this. You can use a service level agreement or an SLA, or you can use entitlements. And service level agreements, they help you meet the desired service levels when you're providing support to your customers. And so the Dynamics 365 SLAs allow you to track like some of the most common KPIs, like first response and the first resolution time for every case that's submitted to you. Whereas on the other hand, we have entitlements. And this is really looking at specific support details that we're promising to our customers. So this might have like specific coverage dates or like the number of cases that they can have or the length of time available for each case. So if you look here on the screen, you can actually see how these two come together. So in the scenario here, we have a gold tier customer and they are entitled to 15 cases a year. And so what they choose to do is they choose to open a case through an email, and the case is automatically created. And their service contract includes an SLA for the first response time to be within 15 minutes. And so what's going to happen is that case is going to get routed to the gold queue so it can be picked up by an agent quickly, and it allows them to meet their SLA. So from there, we are working through the case resolution process. The agent's going to identify the issue, they're going to research it, and then they're going to resolve it. After the case is resolved, that customer's entitlement is going to be adjusted to 14 cases. And that, my friends, is the business process when it comes to entitlements and SLAs. And, we've looked so far at, the customer service flow, but Dynamics is great for a lot of things. But sometimes, you could benefit from other tools. And Dynamics 365 Customer Service has the ability to integrate with other tools to help, with flexibility and, basically provide your organization the support that they need for their customers. And a lot of organizations are going to offer service-based products. For example, you might drop your pet off at the groomers, or you're taking your car down for a service. Or maybe you're having a piece of clothing altered or something aftermarket installed on your car. All of these are going to be different examples of services. Now, inside of the service module, we have a tool called the customer service scheduling. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to give you a central location to track all the services offered and basically look at the schedule for all of your customers, your equipment, and your staff members. And when it comes to the schedule service, I want you to really think of two main features as being services offered. All right. So let's say, for example, you have an auto shop and you provide oil changes to your customers. First, what you have to do is you have to create an oil change service. And so you need to include all the different resources that you need. So that might be you need an oil, you need, a bay for the car, you need any equipment, techs that are needed to perform that oil change. And so when that customer comes in and they're requesting an oil change, you're creating the activity and then you're scheduling it. But what you do is on the parameters, you're actually building that into the service so you know what's available when it comes to changing that oil, and that way you know when to schedule. Now, we do have another tool that you can leverage inside of customer service, and that's called the omni-channel solution. And so what this does is this actually allows your customers to communicate with your organization in a way that works best for them. And since we know customers are using text messages, social media, web chats, all these different ways to communicate with your organization, you want to be able to provide a flexible way for your customers to reach out to support. That way, if they do need any type of help, they can submit those requests easily. But in order to do this, this can actually create a challenge for some organizations. And what we want to do, and the challenge comes in, is making sure that we're providing the customers with a seamless and satisfying experience no matter what channel they use to contact us. And so as the customers are contacting you on all these different channels, it's important that your agents also know, have there been text message or emails. And it's important to have all of this information in one spot. So, when an agent is talking to a customer, they're not going to have to keep repeating themselves over and over. But that's where I have good news for you. So Dynamics 365 Omnichannel for customer service, with this, your agents can interact with customers through all these different channels while still having the same insight to any past interactions. And so when you're inside of the customer service workspace, your agents are going to have what we call a session management. And basically, this is going to allow them to work with all sorts of different customers at once. So while you're working with customer to customer, you may be switching tabs, you might be working with different knowledge articles, but this customer service workspace allows you to maintain all of the same information with the same case and with the same customer, but still being able to switch back and forth without losing any conversation or any of the context or the customer details. And they're going to be able to see all of the cases in their queue and any outstanding activities that they need to do. And this is really helpful if a customer has any type of SLA or entitlements that maybe require your agents to prioritize that response over a response to another case. And really, the customer service workspace, think of it as a one-stop shop for all of your agents' needs. They have access to the knowledge base and can even keep articles open under each session management tab. And when we talk about all of these different tools coming together and we talk about customer service being, driven based off of, the feedback, I want to discuss the customer service insight app. Because, I just think of a traditional call center. They're handling thousands of calls in a single day, if not more. And each of those calls is providing some type of data that you could extract business insights from. Let's say, for example, do you know how long your agents are spending on a call? Or is there a specific issues that your customers are calling on? You can use the detail from all of these calls to help answer some of those questions, and potentially it could improve your organizational efficiency. And Dynamics 365 customer service, what it's doing is through the insights, it can give your organization, different performance metrics, operational data, trends from all of your customer service systems that you can then take action on. And by analyzing the data metrics that are collected, it can actually help you find maybe improvement areas that will have a greater impact on your organization over others. And this allows you to quickly evaluate and respond to any of those KPIs and those different customer satisfaction levels. And the way that this customer service insight tool works is by using artificial intelligence to automatically group your cases into topics. And it uses things like natural language understanding. So it can tell here's all our defective product cases, and it's grouping it into a single topic. And the AI behind this tool is also helping with things like resolution rates. It can help with reducing wait times or even decreasing your customer service costs. And so the dashboard inside of Customer Service Insights, it's giving you a detailed picture of your customer service system. And you can identify key areas for improvement that can increase your system performance and, also increase your customer satisfaction. So, for example, if you were to dig a little bit deeper into your case resolution times, maybe you could find out who your agents are that are taking the longest to resolve an issue. But you could also identify which topics are taking the longest for them to address. And so when you actually take that data and combine with the average resolution rates with the time of their calls, you can actually start to put together maybe next steps. So maybe you're going to want to put together a training plan, or maybe you're going to want to have them shadow a rep with a better service rate. All of this, while that's training, you can also automate a solution. So maybe you see questions of just asking when my bill is due. You could create a chatbot to help with, some of those basic or content related questions. That way you're reducing your overall call volumes. But what I really, when I think about this, our first module of the day is Dynamics 365 customer service. It's going to have all the tools to help support your agents and deliver the ultimate customer experience. And in our next module, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the scenarios where maybe you have a technician from your organization who goes out to a customer to help resolve the issue and perform different routine maintenance. But since we've been going for a little bit now, why don't we go ahead and take a quick 10-minute coffee break, give you a chance to stretch your legs before we get into the field service module. I'm going to go ahead and grab a drink myself, and I'll see you back here in 10. I don't know about you, but I'm refreshed and ready to dig into our next module, which covers field service inside of Dynamics 365. And Dynamics 365 Field Service, what it does is it's providing organizations with all of the tools necessary to deliver on-site services to their customers, and they're still managing their mobile workforce. And when it comes to creating work orders and scheduling and dispatching your technicians, Dynamics is going to have everything that you need to help your techs hit their KPIs. You might be asking yourself, what is field service? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It's any service that's being performed outside of your organization's facility. It normally looks like maybe you're having a technician going to a customer's work site to whether they're doing an install, a repair, or just general maintenance on a piece of equipment. Another way that I want you to think of field service is basically like a mobile workforce management. And a mobile workforce needs to be scheduled and dispatched to provide the services to your customers. And so like all of our other modules, I want to make sure you understand the common terminology when it comes to field service. Remember, this is important when it comes to preparing for the exam. So let's just start first with what a field technician is. These are the folks who are actually performing the work out in the field for your customers. And the work that they're doing is usually defined in what we call the work order. The work order is going to have all of the details like the service needed, the customer's name, and really anything else that pertains to that particular service. And the customer asset, though, that's actually the piece of equipment that's being serviced. So let's say, for example, you have a customer that purchased an AC unit from your organization. That AC unit would be considered a customer asset. And when that asset, has an open work order, a dispatcher or a scheduler is going to assign a field technician to that work order. But when you have your tech going out to the customer site, the goal is to finish or fix the work order in a single visit. This is referred to the first time fix rate, and it's actually a major key performance indicator for your technicians. And if I look here at the last few items, they're all going to refer to the time that it takes for your tech to arrive at the job and complete that work order. So ETA, or estimated time of arrival, is basically the time that they're expected to arrive. And that might vary if they're dispatched in a truck, or, you might hear that as a truck roll. And the tech that, if we have any type of additional time that they need to go out and get supplies or equipment for the work order, that's what we considered windshield time, the time that they're driving, or, the time that they're not actually working on the customer's site. And that's something, windshield time, that's not something you want to have a lot of. Since when you send out your techs, you want to have everything with them the first time they go out. So what I want to do is I actually want to take a deeper look at the field service lifecycle. And we've looked at a lot of different life cycles in this class. But first, with the field service, a work order has to be generated. And this usually comes in the form of some sort of demand. Maybe it's an open customer issue, or it can be something as simple as like a regular maintenance that's already been scheduled. The work order itself is going to include all the information that your field technicians need to complete the job. The scheduling team is then going to work and assign that work order to a qualified technician who's going to go out and complete that service. After that service is completed, the customer's going to make sure everything is to their satisfaction or the problem's been resolved, and then they're going to actually sign off on that work order. So that work order, once it's signed off, is marked as completed, and then if there's any back office tasks, like think payroll or invoicing, that can all be sent off. And the procedures that are required, they're going to vary from industry, basically each of these tasks. But I would say this is kind of the general process for most field service operations. And inside of Dynamics 365, the field service app can actually help with that field service lifecycle, and it can help your organization deliver on-site services to your customers, and it helps you manage your mobile workforces. So It's a complete field service solution, and it's combining work order automation, scheduling, and mobility to ensure that any mobile workers are going to have what they need to fix the customer issue while they're in the field. And when it comes to tracking, field services can track the work orders across your entire organization. And so it's going to help your technicians and your dispatch team know what tools, what products, basically anything that's needed to complete the work order to help cut down on that windshield time. Now, you can also create separate services for different types of tasks that weren't part of that original work order, or maybe it's outside of that customer contract. So let's say, for example, you have an appliance removal fee for, any old appliances that need to be removed that aren't part of that installation. You can also set up different task lists. Kind of think of these task lists as like a to-do list for your techs while they're working on that work order. And this is extremely helpful when it comes to, your techs, making sure that they are completing every step without missing any of them. And these service tasks, they can be associated with any incident or work order. What I want you to think of incidents is they're really just templates that auto-populate the key details in the work order to help save time on that intake process. Let's say, for example, the type of work order that needs to be done, what resources are going to be needed to complete the work itself. And it's not just the work order portion of the field service that Dynamics can help you with. After that demand has been generated, the items that are going to be needed when it comes to scheduling and dispatching, they're going to be able to see that all in one view. And the way that it works is the Dynamics 365 field service leverages what we call the resource scheduling, and it can actually help schedule all the different items and resources needed. So what it does is it gives your scheduling team the ability to schedule, work orders, time off, audits, more, and they're able to see your entire staff in one view. As far as this goes, this is kind of the first key component of Dynamics 365 field service. So why don't we actually look at the life cycle of a work order and create one inside of field service? Work orders are pretty easy to create, and you can actually have a work order. Let's say if I have that housing repair, I can have a bunch of different details auto-populated based off of triggering scenarios. And I actually want to talk about some of the more little details when it comes to these work orders. So, when we created the work order, you saw that it's going to include things like who the work is for, any type of work that's going to be performed, time frames, products, services, when it needs to be delivered, any tasks that need to be done, and there can be more included. Now, how and when your organization creates a work order, it actually can depend on a couple of different factors. So, for example, what is your service model? Do you have any type of procedures, and what technology is being used? The way that Dynamics 365 field service supports the creation of work orders is, you have a couple different options. Maybe it's after a sale is completed or when a customer is submitting a schedule request. And regardless of how that work order is being created, it's always going to have the key information that impacts how and when it's scheduled, as well as the steps that the technician needs to take to finish the work order. And this can help your scheduling team and make sure that, one, it's being executed correctly, but it's also going to let you know what tools are going to be needed and what experience that your technicians need to have. So the first thing, though, when we look at a work order, it's always going to be associated with an account. The account record, it can be a service account, like where the work is being done. But you can also use a billing account, and that's where the invoice for the work is going to be sent. With the account, you're also going to have the category of the work order as well as a priority. So you can set preferences for things like start times as well as scheduling. And so as we look at each of the work orders, we're going to have what's called a status that's basically telling us what is the state of that work order in the moment. And so this lets us know where that work order is in that lifecycle process. And as it goes through the lifecycle, the status will change based on the work order record. So if we look at what we have here on the screen, we first have the work order creation. This usually comes from a case or an opportunity. So the work order status is going to show as open. But as we move into the scheduling phase, this is where your dispatch team can assign technicians to work on the order. And the status is then going to be updated to show as scheduled. Then what happens is the tech is going to be alerted that they've been assigned a work order. They have a choice to either accept or to deny that work order. And once they accept the work order, the system will notify basically everybody who's going to be involved. And then, the tech is going to, on the day of the work order, they're going to get to the customer location and they're going to make a note of it in the system of when they arrive that updates that status to in progress. So as the tech is performing and, working on that service, they're going to be able to update the work order through the field service mobile app. And again, the work order status is going to be updated from in progress to complete once they finish out that work order. And so kind of the next step after the work order has been completed, it really just kind of depends on your organization's procedures. So you may require a supervisor to sign off on the work order to ensure that it's completed. But after they sign off on the work order, the order status will be updated to closed. And then any invoices or inventory adjustments, those can be made. And that right there is kind of the full overview of a work order. But there are kind of a couple of other components that are important to understand when it comes to creating work orders. I mentioned earlier that you can create incidents, and those are used as templates when you're creating your work orders. And the way I want you to think of incidents is like this. Let's say, for example, my company provides MRI machines. And as part of the sales contract, I'm going to provide a monthly service package for the first 3 years. As a result, technicians are going to be going out and they're dispatched to that customer location to complete what we call an MRI inspection. Now, to make our team's life easier, we can create an incident for MRI inspections that's basically going to include all the items that are needed for that inspection. So we might have lithium batteries, maybe we have the coils, and all of these are going to be added to the product list. I can also add a service for MRI sanitation as part of the inspection process. And then in order to make sure that, if I have any new techs out there, they know everything that's part of the inspection, I can create a task list. And basically this is going to have all sorts of different predefined times of how long they should be spending on each task. So for example, maybe they need to check the usage of the machine, and that's going to take 30 minutes. They need to replace that battery. And since we included on the product list, it's going to only take 15 minutes since they're going to have all the parts with them. And, we brought that coil, and that's going to take about 30 minutes or so. And, just to be safe, to kind of wrap up the inspection, we'll give them an extra 15 minutes for reviewing the work with the customer and getting that signature to show that that work was completed. Now, in our case, about 90% of our inspections use this exact process. So instead of having, to add each of these detailed steps, the products, everything to an inspection work order each and every time, what we can do was we'll just create that incident called an MRI inspection. And so when we say that the work order is for an MRI inspection, all of that information is going to be populated. And you know what? As far as like work orders, it's not just like you get one incident and that's it. You can actually have a number of different incidents per work order. It just depends on what you need. Now, an incident is great, but what happens if you don't need a full incident and, maybe you just need kind of a task list? Well, that's where we can have a more lightweight template. And instead of an incident, this is what we call an inspection. So I mentioned earlier that service tasks can be added to the work order, and it's kind of as a to-do list to help provide guidance to your technicians. So, if I'm doing a site survey, I might have a task on the work order like perform fire safety check. All right, so when I'm performing that inspection, it's going to take 30 minutes. And during that inspection, I'm looking at the extinguishers in the room. I'm making sure that they're accessible. I'm going to make sure that they're not expired. And, I also might be making sure that they're not tampered with. What I can do is after I've done all those tasks, I can mark that inspection as complete. And I kind of want you to think of an inspection as kind of like a digital form that your technicians are filling out in the field. And so some of the questions that you can include, things like safety protocols, maybe pass-fail tests for customer assets, or an interview with a customer, or kind of basically any other audits or assessments that you want to perform. And you can have them set up to be performed before an inspection, or before a work order, during a work order, or even after the work order. And the nice thing is that these inspections inside of Dynamics 365 Field Service is that since your technicians may not always have internet access, they can fill these out offline on their tablet or their phone. And then once they are within internet access, it's all automatically going to sync all that information. And with this, because you might have technicians that are offline, let's say if your management team or your scheduling team is pushing out some sort of update. Basically, with a simple click of a button, all of those updates are going to be sent out to the customer asset and updated on the field service app too once they have that internet connection. But, really, field service, it's designed to provide your organization with, the flexibility that you need to help basically meet not only your organizational standards, but also your service standards. So since we understand the work order, I want to kind of go into the scheduling team or your dispatch team. Because let's be honest, while your technicians are out in the field, it's your scheduling team who's making sure that everything is running smoothly behind the scenes. So Dynamics 365 Field Service can actually help organizations effectively manage the scheduling for their mobile workforce, and it ensures that all of your customers are being provided quality service that are being performed by qualified technicians. And it's incredibly important that your system has the right tools for your dispatch team, because they need to be able to see if a work order is actually ready to be scheduled, or just because we have a work order and it's been created, it doesn't always necessarily mean that it's ready to be scheduled. What happens if you're waiting on parts, and you can't complete the work order before those parts come in? Because the goal, if you remember, is to only have your techs go out once. Now, speaking of our techs, what tools are they going to need? How do they know what to bring to complete the job? Or how do you know who is best suited to complete the work? Because what happens if they need a skill set? Or what happens if you need someone like a flexible schedule who can work overnight or after hours to meet the customer's schedule? So there are so many different considerations that go into scheduling. And Dynamics 365 for Field Service can help you dispatch the right technician to the right job and making sure that they have the right tools. So one other thing that I want to point out is when it comes to scheduling, you're going to hear the term resources. And a resource comes in a few different forms. A resource can be a person, it can be a piece of equipment, or it can be a facility that is being scheduled to work on. So when it comes to scheduling resources, you're going to schedule both resource roles and resource skills. So a resource role, think of this as like a developer or a technician. This makes it so you can indicate only someone who's in a certain role can be scheduled for a work order. So let's say if we have a senior technician that's required, only a senior technician can be scheduled. But on the other hand, with resource skills, maybe a job requires a certain level of building access, or maybe you need a security clearance. Your technicians are probably going to have more than one skill assigned to them. Maybe it's based off of any certifications or different qualifications that they have. And, as you can tell, there's a lot that goes into scheduling than simply seeing who's available. So your dispatchers typically need all of this information at their disposal. And depending on your organization size, your dispatch team can be scheduling anywhere from, 20 to hundreds of potential resources a day. And, things change. A lot of things happen throughout the day that can impact scheduling. What happens if there's an emergency work order that's going to take priority over everything else? Or what happens if you have a technician with a certain role or a certain skill and they call in sick? And these things happen. And your dispatchers need to be able to make schedule changes as quickly as possible. And so inside of Dynamics 365 Field Service, we have what's called the schedule board. And this helps your dispatchers understand basically all of this information in a digestible way. So they can see in real time what is scheduled, including all of the resources that have been assigned, the times, as well as the current status. And in addition to this, they can actually see what needs to be scheduled, any type of availability around the resources. So if they need to know what people are needed or what facilities and all that equipment, they can see it. And, as far as scheduling goes, there's a number of different ways that you can schedule a resource. I can actually show you a couple different ways right now inside of the system. So let's go ahead and log back in. All right, so we are back in our field service application, and I'm still in my work orders. I'm under my active work orders, but what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create a new work order. Again, remember, there's a couple of different ways that they can come in. Maybe they're calling our central call center. Maybe they're submitting it online. Doesn't matter. In this case, we're manually creating it. And let's say that it's Fabricam residences. And so in this case, we have the billing account that's used. It's still open, and you notice that system status right here. You can see all the different statuses that go along in that workflow. But we are open and unscheduled. And they're calling in for a window repair. And as far as a price list goes, we're going to use the Contoso coffee price list. It's not because, they're a company of Contoso, but the reason we're using this is because the window repair pricing is going to be the same for Fabricam as it is for Contoso coffee. Probably if I were to go back and redo this, I would have one price list that's just nice and generic that I can use across multiple accounts. Other than that, the only other required area is whether or not it's taxable, and I'm going to make sure that says no, and I can go ahead and set save. Remember, we just need that basic information. Okay, so I have my work order. Now what I can do is I can actually book my resource. So if I come up here to that command bar and I select book, it looks like a little calendar next to it. When I select book, we can see Alan, my technician, he is available, and I can even search for certain times. But let's just go ahead and say we want to get him out there later on in the afternoon. So in this case, let's say that we want the work order to start at 4 p.m., meaning that we're looking for an arrival time of 3:30, or actually let's say 3:50. He doesn't need to be sitting around for that long. And then we're looking for probably, we want it to start at 4. We want to give a little bit of leeway time. And as far as the end time, we're looking for this to probably finish up around 6. All right. Oh, and you can see, so that's actually interesting. So you can see that estimated arrival time, you can see that even though we're starting at 4, it won't let me have him arrive earlier, because if he's there, we don't necessarily want him just sitting in his van. So in this case, I'm going to use the scheduling assistant. I can always go back and manually make that change if I wanted to, but I am going to just say, fine, you're arriving at 4, you'll end up at 6, and that booking status will leave it as scheduled. So now I can go ahead and book and close this out. And this work order now is considered scheduled, and I can select save. And so now that we're saved, you can see that we have now went to open, scheduled. And if I want, I can actually come over here to the schedule board. So the schedule board is going to see all of my open work orders. I can also see any of my unscheduled work orders. So you can see I have all my other active work orders that I haven't scheduled a person to. But we can actually see Alan here on the grid that he has some work orders scheduled later on. And we can see, Alan's actually starting at 6 a.m. and then we scheduled him to go to 6 p.m. Perhaps we need to make some changes to his schedule. But if we actually look at the work order that we scheduled earlier, we can see, okay, we have our work order number. We can see the account that we want it to be tied to, so the resource, the end time, as well as the booking status. Let's say, for example, though, we were like, hey, it doesn't make sense for him to start at 6 a.m. So I can actually take this work order that's scheduled earlier. Let's say that I called the customer. Again, that's a task I'd want to add. But I can actually maybe drag it to 2 p.m. And then that way, the customer told me that, hey, we don't have to start at 6, we can actually start at 2. This allows me to kind of consolidate Alan's schedule instead of having him work, this insanely long day. And then maybe this 6 p.m., Alan says, I don't think this work order will take me that long and the drive time doesn't look that crazy. So maybe we reschedule it to 3 p.m. And you can see where this hourly view of the schedule board is great. And it allows you to make those changes right here, and it's going to be updated across the rest of Dynamics. So now that we've seen how items can be scheduled both manually and with the scheduling assistant, why don't we go ahead and take a look at how resource scheduling optimization can be used to automate and optimize your scheduling process. And so Resource Scheduling Optimization, or RSO, what it is, it's an add-on capability for Dynamics 365 for field service. And it allows your organization to automatically schedule work orders for the best resource. Your schedulers can optimize bookings to help minimize travel time, maximize working hours, and schedule the most qualified technicians, and so much more. So let's say, for example, your customers or your organization have a policy to schedule high priority, can we just, 2 mess ups at that close to.
3.
For example, your organization may have a policy to schedule high priority items as soon as possible, since they're generally associated with a contract, customers, or maybe emergency situations. But those non-high priority work orders have a little bit more flexibility. And so you could actually set up an intraday schedule that's running every 30 minutes throughout the day, and then it automatically schedules any high priority items that haven't been scheduled yet. And then what we have is a second schedule that's running every 2 hours and scheduling all new unscheduled items that aren't high priority. And as the day goes on, your dispatchers, they can see basically any new item that's been scheduled on that scheduling board. And if they want, you saw how easy it is to make manual adjustments if the need's there. But this doesn't have to be a manual process. Remember, we're built on the Dataverse, so you can use Power Automate to create a flow, which basically can run anytime a work order is flagged as an emergency. And then the application is going to schedule that emergency item for the most appropriate technician and basically any other criteria that you have set up in the application. And so that's one way of scheduling. And we know how our work orders are created, and we know how our technicians are scheduled. But there is one other component that is incredibly important when it comes to managing the field service process. You're going to have to be able to keep track of all of your inventory inside of your organization's warehouse. Because think about it. Let's say you have 10 parts that you have on hand in your warehouse, and there are 12 open work orders that are going to require that part. How do you know which work order or which job have a part and which ones need to order it? Dynamics 365 Field Service uses the Dynamics 365 product catalog to define all the products that are being used for a particular work order. And your technicians, they're using the same products on their work orders that salespeople can use for opportunities or quotes and orders. And those products and services are added to the work orders and are being subtracted from the inventory as your technicians complete the work order in the field. Now, when I say warehouse, in this case, I'm not necessarily referring to like a full-blown distribution center. A warehouse is really simply where your organization stores its products. And this can be a building, it can be a shed, it can be an office, or it can even be a truck. So let's say, for example, if my company services HVACs or air conditioning units, I have a number of different technicians who work for me, and they're responsible for installing and repairing these devices. So I have a central warehouse that I'm going to keep new equipment in before it's being installed. Now, I also have some of the parts that go along with that installation process or general maintenance. But if one of my techs takes any equipment out with them, as they go on a call, that inventory is going to be transferred from the warehouse to the tech's trucks. So this makes it so I can see what I have available for use, what's been committed to a work order, and what I need to reorder. And, I want to make sure, because I think this is a really important topic here, is I want to make sure you understand the difference between an inventory adjustment and an inventory transfer. An adjustment allows for your inventory managers to adjust the quantity of a product in a specific warehouse. Inventory adjustments, they might be used when you add a new truck or a physical warehouse to a building and you're having to populate the inventory in it. Or maybe you simply just got a new product and it needs to be added to a warehouse. So let's say if you were setting like the initial levels for a new warehouse, an adjustment product would be created that defines basically the product itself and the initial quantity for each one. On the other hand, though, we have what's called inventory transfer. And this is when you are moving a specific amount of product from one warehouse to another. So let's say, for example, if I have 4 work orders that require a specific type of compressor and my technician only has 2 on his truck, I can load 2 compressors from John's truck from the central warehouse. And basically what's happening is an inventory transfer record would be created to show that we have the 2 compressors that are on the truck already, and then we are transferring 2 more from the warehouse. Now, this is just one way that you can manage your inventory, but I actually want to show you some of the back office pieces that are going on behind the scenes in Dynamics 365 Field Service. So if your organization purchases any type of product, they're probably going to put in a purchase order. Now, when the product comes in, it's either going to go into a warehouse or, it's going directly to a work order so that way your technicians can complete their work. Now, this is important to understand because if you have a tech out in the field working on a repair, they may realize that they're missing a part that they need to complete that repair. So they can actually submit a purchase order for the part that they need right there from their phone. Now, depending on the organization, you might need a supervisor or let's say a parts manager who has to submit that PO. But essentially that PO, the purchase order, is going to be created and then the part is going to be ordered from your vendor. Now, since the PO is tied to a work order, it's really easy for your back office to know where they need to bill for that particular part. But what about when your technician has a part, that they thought they needed, but ended up not using it? And this is where you could process a return. It could be maybe you had excess or maybe you had a defective product. The tech is going to create what's called a return merchandise authorization, which is basically a receipt showing that the product and the quantity was removed and that customer should not be billed for it. It's also going to adjust your inventory levels if the product is being returned to the warehouse. But, when it comes to all of this, it's not just the pieces and the products and the services that are being used to maintain the equipment. I mean, you have to figure out and know what equipment is at each customer's location. Now, depending on the size of your organization, your customers may have equipment that you are responsible for inspecting, maintaining, repairing, and you need to be able to see all the details when it comes to that equipment. Where is it in the building? And, what work orders have been completed and what's outstanding? Well, Dynamics 365 has an asset management feature inside of Field Service that can help you when it comes to managing your equipment. In this case, this is what we call your assets. And an asset can be anything from a large piece of manufacturing equipment, technology, an appliance like an air conditioner. Really, an asset is going to start as a product that's stored in a warehouse. Now, after the product has been delivered to the customer, it is then automatically converted into an asset. So let's say, for example, I have a technician who completes a work order that includes the installation of a 3D printer. The printer is converted from a product to a customer asset that then is going to have work orders associated with it in the future. In a moment, though, I want to show you how easy it is to create a customer asset, but I want to discuss how you can keep track of all of your customer assets without necessarily having to be on site with it. And so that's where with Connected Field Service, it allows your organization to transform the way that they provide service. So instead of always having to dispatch a technician when a product breaks and they have to come out and fix it, you can actually leverage an IoT connected service to monitor the assets and then proactively predict a service model through a number of different diagnostic tools. Maybe it's scheduling, asset maintenance, and basically inventory all on one platform. And that's what Dynamics 365 Connected Field Service does. You can remotely monitor, manage, and maintain all of your different IoT devices directly from Dynamics 365 Field Service. But what I want to do is I actually want to show you how this works inside of the system. So first, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create an asset, and I'll show you how to do that. But basically, what we have is after that asset is created, the IoT device record is created, and it's registered to that asset. That IoT device is constantly monitoring the asset, and it's looking for things like anomalies. So, if there's a temperature spike. And if an anomaly is detected, an alert is automatically going to be sent to Connected Field Service. Maybe we already know about that alert and we know it's going to be a firmware issue. And we have already set up a Power Automate flow that's triggered to update that firmware. And so this makes it so that that device is updated remotely, no dispatch was needed, no downtime on the customer side, and ultimately we save time and money. I think it's great. So why don't we go ahead and log into the customer asset inside of the field service and create one. And again, we are back in our field service app, but this time instead of going to work orders, I'm actually going to scroll down here to the very bottom and you can see my assets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select asset. And you can see here are my current active customer assets, but I want to create a new one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select new. And I am going to name this, I'm going to name this my IoT 3D printer. All right. And this case for the account, I am going to put it under the Adatum Corporation. And that's the only two required ones, so I'm going to go ahead and select Save and Close. So now I have the 3D printer that has been assigned to this account. So if I actually go to the account for this company, I'm going to select the Adatum Corporation. And what I am going to do is I'm actually going to make an edit to it. And I'm going to edit the address here. So you can see the service address. I have it as the 1 Microsoft Way. And if I wanted to, I have it for the One Microsoft Way, Redmond, Washington. But what I want to do is I am actually going to add in a building number. So I'm going to say building 21. So that way I have the right location, and I'm going to select done. Now this is where I've updated the address, and now I'm going to go to my assets and my locations. And this is right here at the top. And we can see that I have my Datum Corporation. I'm going to add a new location. And so in this case, I'm going to name this Building 2. And as far as the address goes, I am going to make a change, and I'm going to do One Microsoft Way. The city is Redmond, Washington. But, oops, I want to make sure I put building 2 in here so that we have the right address. And then the zip code is 98052. And I can go ahead and select done, save and close. And now I'm going to have the update on the building 1 and building 2. All right. Now, what I can do is if I come back to my customer asset here and I select on this 3D printer, I can now have a functional location. So you can see here I want to actually add it to building 2. And so now that lets me know that this IoT 3D printer is located in building 2. Now if I wanted to, I can actually, I'm going to select save real fast. I'm going to come up to my functional locations under assets. And if I look at building 2, I can add it to a parent location. So this parent location here, let's say, for example, I want to also associate it with floor 2. And when I select save, this now lets me, when I look at my assets, this will let me know, my tech know, if they need to go out here, that we are on building 2, floor 2. And so when it comes to maintaining any of the printers at this location, makes it nice and easy to know where we're going to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that real fast. And if we come under asset locations, you can also see, so we have floor 2 on building 2, and here is my IoT 3D printer. So this makes it really easy for me and my techs when it goes through and I'm having to create any work orders and where they need to be. Now, if I did have any other IoT devices, like in this case, setting up an IoT device is quite a bit, but if I did want to connect this 3D printer, I can then select the account. So in this case, it is my 3D printer. And again, I don't have any of the tags, but this lets me know I can then connect it to any of my assets, and then I can set up different alerts here. But that's pretty much how you set up a customer asset, how you let them know what the location is, and if you wanted to tie it to any other IoT devices, you can do that all here. As you can see, the asset management and IoT capabilities provided in Dynamics 365 Field Service allows organizations to maintain a catalog of different assets for all the customers that they service. And by maintaining this catalog, you can easily see what maintenance and repairs have been done on that equipment, along with being able to quickly open up new work orders related to them. And this is probably going to be one of the biggest modules that we're covering in this virtual training day as a whole. And really, we were only able to scratch the surface. Keep in mind, though, that this is a fundamentals course, and we're really only introducing concepts. But if you wanted to go back and review anything, I highly recommend that you check out the learning path at aka.ms/MB910. But we only have one more module to go today. So before we get into that, why don't we take our last break and make sure we're ready to go for Module 6, which is all about project operations inside of Dynamics 365. So I'll see you back here soon. Welcome back from break. We are on to our last and final module of not only today, but of this whole virtual training day session. And while I'm sad that the fun is coming to an end, I'm more excited because I hope that these sessions have been helpful for those of you who are planning on taking the MB 910 exam. But I think we should just get right to it and talk about Module 6, which is all about Dynamics 365 project operations. And up to this point in time, we've looked at how Dynamics can help organizations that sell products or services. But what happens if your organization is more project-based, where you're not selling just a single product or service? Say, for example, what if you are looking at providing staffing resources to help complete a project or the knowledge to go through a launch? In this module, we're going to be exploring on how Dynamics 365 project operations can help with the tools needed to control projects using things like traditional waterfall and agile methodologies, as well as manage resources with accurate information for analysis of those resource allocations and utilizations. So in order to understand the differences between a product service-based company and a project-based company, let's kind of compare the two. A product service company may be something like a car repair shop that's providing parts and the services to repair your car. But a project-based company is a company who is, let's say, building a highway that the cars drive on. The product service-based company sells a service or is making a specific product that they sell as a potential solution to a problem. Whereas a project-based company is creating a solution based on multiple products and sells it as an overall package solution. Project-based companies have challenges that don't normally apply to product-based sales companies. So in most cases, project-based organizations are utilizing and need to manage both labor and materials. And by now, you know that we're going to need to cover terminology. However, since project operations has a lot of key terms, I'm going to just be going over these at a high level. Again, I highly recommend that you review all of these inside of the learning path at aka.ms/MB910. So if we start, a good project is going to have a goal or an objective. This is really the intended outcome of the project. It can also be a deliverable. Basically, this is what the company is being hired to do or to produce. Now, in order to reach that goal, you're likely going to need to set a series of mini goals, and we call these milestones. This is what we use as kind of like our timeline in order to track our progress. And the way we track all of these mini milestones is what we call a Gantt chart. And it's kind of like a visual tool to see all of the different milestones and the start and end date for each of them. But the planning isn't just about the timeline. There are budget and resource allocations that need to be taken into consideration, like how much is all of this is going to cost, or who is available to work on this. There are also some considerations that, you may not be able to track as easily. That's where we're going to look at things like level of effort. And inside of Dynamics, we have effort management tools that can make sure that we are optimizing our resources to help meet our goal. And while all of this is in progress, we refer to this as a project. And there are a lot of key players who go into making sure that the project is successful. First, we have the project manager, and they're going to be responsible for the overall strategy, and they're going to use a number of different project management tools to make sure that the resources are being used both effectively and efficiently. Usually, they oversee the project team. And on the other hand, we have the practice manager, where they are responsible for making sure that the stakeholder business strategies are being executed. But there's more to consider than just the tasks of the project. You need to be aware of any type of risks that are involved and be aware of any type of scheduling conflicts. And this is something that you're going to review in the project scope and the work breakdown structure that includes all of the tasks that need to be completed in order to complete the project. And this isn't a project management certification or a class on how to run a project. I just wanted to share some of the key words that you might hear when working in Dynamics 365 project operations. So, over the life of a project, the project is going to go through different phases. And while projects are different, the overall phases that a project goes through are similar to one another. And we're going to explore this in more detail later on, but let's just start with the initiation phase. This is where you are identifying the business need, the problem, or maybe an opportunity, and what you're trying to do is brainstorm ways that your team can meet this need, solve the problem, or, seize that opportunity. We then move on to the planning phase. This is where you're going to break down the larger project into smaller tasks. You're building your team, and basically you're preparing the schedule for the completion of all of the different assignments that need to happen. You're then moving into the execution phase, where then you are taking your plan and you're turning it into action. During this phase, your project managers kind of keep the work on track. You're organizing the team and you're managing all the different timelines to make sure that the work is done according to that original plan. And then finally, the last phase, we have that closure phase. And this is where you are providing those final deliverables. You're releasing all of those project resources and basically looking back and determining the overall success of that project. And we're going to explore all of this in more detail later on. But Dynamics 365 project operations can help with every phase of the project lifecycle. And I mentioned earlier, Dynamics 365 project operations allows you to connect your project selling team, staffing, resources, and project management team, and basically anyone else all in a single application that's designed to accelerate that project delivery and ultimately maximize your profitability. Project operations is going to be really powerful on its own, but you can actually expand it by using some of the other capabilities from other Dynamics 365 applications, things like marketing, human resources, customer service, finance and operations, and more. And so when it comes to just the size of your organization, there's different deployment options when it comes to project operations, and you can choose the one that meets your needs. But I don't want you to worry like you have to know what you need. There is a built-in questionnaire that can help you determine the best deployment option for you. So the first deployment option that we have is the light deployment. This is really going to be best for those organizations who are using other dynamic applications or other ERP resources. And this one is really good for more with the pricing, invoicing, and time tracking. Whereas with the project operations for resource or non-stock scenarios, this is used when you are trying to use the rest of the customer engagement apps. And so it's going to include everything from the light deployment option, but it's also going to have full invoicing and revenue recognition capabilities. And then finally, what we have is the project operations for stocked or production order scenarios. And in this case, it's a full end-to-end solution, and it's going to have everything that you need to manage your project. So I think that's kind of covers the basics of project operations. So what I want to do is I want to look at some of the features like managing the project sales process, because project-based selling organizations have different needs than those that sell products. The sales lifecycle really kind of tends to be a little bit longer, and there's more moving parts that you need to have accounted for when you are going through that sales cycle. So what here I have on the screen, let's say, for example, you are selling a custom application development project. And so the design process alone, this can take weeks or even months based on the different requirements. And so only then, once you understand the scope of the project, that's when you can start to offer pricing. And, it can be based off of the geography of where it's located or the different resources that are being used. And so the way that Dynamics 365 project operations helps with this is that it uses what we call business process flows to support the project-based projects. Now, this is similar to the sales process, that we looked at in our first session in the sales module, but there's going to be some key differences between the two. So if we think about that software development example, during the qualify stage, an opportunity is going to help us identify if we are a good fit for the customer and if that customer is a good fit for us as a client. Now, we need to understand what their needs are and what their expectations are. And only then, when we understand that, can we provide a quote. And this is going to provide the customer with an estimate of how long the project is going to take and how much it's going to cost. Now, this estimate may evolve over time, and that's going to depend on how the details of the project evolve. So that estimate is then going to be reviewed by those internal stakeholders, and they're going to make sure it meets their needs. And only after both parties agree to the terms of the estimate, that quote turns into a contract. Now, this project contract is going to continue to be used. We're going to capture details, and it's going to give us a reference as we are delivering, on the project itself. And after everything is completed, the project contract is then going to be closed. And as you can see, if you look at this, we're going to start the sales process in the same way. We need to start with the lead. And a project-based lead is similar to a product-based lead. In fact, the only real difference is in the type field in the system, you're just going to set it to work-based. And all this means is that the record will likely exist as a project lead for a short period of time. Because here's the thing with the leads and projects. The second you start talking about those high-level details, that lead basically needs to go right into a project-based opportunity. And once you have that project lead and it's been converted into a project opportunity, this is where you're collecting all of those specific details, such as potential revenue, timelines, work that needs to be done, and so on. In fact, many organizations use project opportunities as basically the true qualification stage in their sales process. And this is where the sales team is going to spend most of their time and most of their effort. And, after you have all of those details for the project, you're ready to create that proposal or a quote for that project work. And a project quote can have multiple line items or quote lines added to it. So these things include things like tasks or expense-related items for that project that we're providing the quote on. And you can include other details like how the project will bill, or if there's any taxes or fees, or any type of invoicing schedule that goes along with it. And one other advantage of using project operations for project-based selling is the fact that the project you are selling can be based on the items that you are quoting to your clients. So while the project quote is being created, an estimated project plan can actually be built and tied to that project quote. So after the quote has been agreed upon and, everybody's on the same page, we are then going from a quote to a contract. And that project contract basically is capturing and managing all of the agreed upon commitments and the billing details of that particular project. And you can actually see on the screen some of the different items that are typically covered in a contract. And because of that, project contracts are made accessible inside of Dynamics fairly easily. And this ensures that you always have the sales information related to that project, and that way you can access it while you're working on those deliverables. So since we've looked at the tools that can help with project selling, why don't we actually explore some of the tools that can help with the estimating and planning, so that way your projects are completed on time and within budget. And so when we were discussing some of that terminology around project operations, I mentioned that project manager was going to be responsible for ensuring that the project objectives and obligations were met. And that can be a lot of work, and there's so many different moving pieces. So inside of Dynamics 365 Project Operations, there are different tools like dashboards, task management, project and resource scheduling, interactive Gantt charts, and even work breakdown structures. And so all of your project managers can use these tools to develop accurate estimates for labor, expenses, as well as materials. And, we've looked at the sales side or the opportunity side of the project stages, but I want to go a little bit more detail into the planning phase. So once you have a customer who agrees to move forward with a deal, the project moves into the planning phase. And this is where you're going to need to define more specific details about the project itself, like who's the project team that's going to deliver that project. The project manager is going to be extremely conscious of these details because this is ultimately what's going to help them manage all the different daily activities, staffing issues, and the expenses that go along with it. And it's not just the project manager who's working. The work of the project is usually carried out by an entire team. And that team can be made up of people on internal staff, maybe people offshore, or independent contractors. So when you are creating the project plan, you're going to need to determine which team member is going to complete each task on the project. And this is where what we have the project grid. This is where that comes into play. The project team member grid assists you in determining which of the team members are going to do what job. And so the main purpose is to help you come up with a list of names of all of the resources who have been committed to the project. And you don't necessarily need to know the specific details of each person right away. In fact, in most cases, the hiring process for the team may come later. So for this reason, we have generic team members that basically are acting as placeholders until we have an actual resource that's been assigned. But inside of the team member grid, the project manager can see anyone else working on the project. But they can also view the summary of their bookings, the planned effort, and the individual resource assignments. And because it's not just the team that the project manager needs to work about. That's one of it. But the other big piece that they need to worry about is the expenses. They have to pay attention to the costs that are incurred while a project is in progress. For example, you have a construction worker who's doing on-site work and they might need to stay overnight in a hotel. What happens if they need to pay for gas to get to the job site in the morning or eat meals? All of these expenses need to be accounted for because they're going to impact the profitability of your project. And it's extra important to track these things because the construction company, what happens if we only budgeted a specific amount for things like lodging, meals, or travel? And so inside of project operations, you have two options when it comes to tracking expenses. You have the full model, which allows you to create full policies that enforce like day limits and categories, where we have the basic that's only really going to allow you to record basic expenses against the project itself. But I hope you're starting to see that there are so many different moving pieces in a single project. And that's what makes the project manager's job so incredibly important. And they need to be able to keep track of the costs, the profits, the overall timeline, and they have to make sure that they aren't overusing a resource or underusing a resource. And if they aren't careful or they're not closely tracking all of this information, well, the projects can easily get off the tracks, or the resources can be over-allocated and then projects are just ballooning out of control and then we're running out of budget. But Dynamics 365 Project Operations is providing your project managers with multiple options to quickly identify important project-related information. For example, the Project Manager dashboard can let you see any information related to your resources. So if you needed to see a summary of resource requests by the different roles, you could see that in your organization in one view. But we also have the Practice Manager dashboard. And this is where you could see information related to the costs, the profit margins, and the sales. It's going to let you view the information as it relates to the current month, last month, or if you wanted to, you could even do a side-by-side comparison. And like all the other modules inside of Dynamics, there are also charts that allow you to visualize the information. For example, if you wanted to do like the estimated costs versus the actual costs, that lets you quickly compare estimated costs versus the actual costs that are being accrued for all of the projects. Or you could use the estimated hours versus the actual hours, which lets you compare the estimated hours versus the actual hours that being accrued for the projects listed. All of this information allows your project managers to make better decisions related to the projects that they are delivering to their customers. We have one last lesson in this module. And so far, we've looked at how you can manage expenses, but we need to look at how you are managing your resources. And the ability to manage a project's resources is critical for success. Because if you don't choose the right resource or use them at the right time, well, you could find yourself with costly delays that are not only going to hurt your deadline, but it's going to impact your profitability, and it can also impact your organization's reputation. Now, remember, a resource can be a person, a piece of equipment, a facility that you're working on during the project, and it can change how you use that term. But the ability to identify the right resource at the right time and book those resources on those different project tasks and keep them utilized, well, that's a big task, and that's what's going to help you meet your revenue targets and also meet your customers' goals. Dynamics 365 Project Operations has a number of different tools to help make sure that you're leveraging the right resources for your project. And the type of resource that's needed for an item can vary, depending on what type of task it is or where you are in the project planning phase. So when you're scheduling a person as a resource, not only do you need to know what type of resource you need, but we also need to ensure that they're qualified to work on the item that's being scheduled. Different items require resources that have specific qualities to complete it. For example, maybe a plumber might need to run and install plumbing lines for a sprinkler system. Now, because this is related to fire and safety, the average plumber might not have the right skills. So maybe we need a plumber who's skilled and certified in fire equipment to be scheduled instead. And in order to make sure that your project has the right resources, a project-based organization can define skills and roles that can be added to items or project tasks and resources. So when that task is being scheduled, only resources with the skills or let's say the role that you need is going to be suggested as an option to be scheduled. But since we have kind of like that basic understanding of what resources and the different ways that those items are scheduled, we can actually start using them in our projects themselves. Now, the way that resources are scheduled, it's very similar to what we looked at in field service, but there are some key differences. When we schedule a resource inside of project operations, you have two options. You can either schedule an assignment or a booking. An assignment is a commitment of a resource, but it may be out there in the future. For example, if my developer is assigned as a resource to a project task called develop the user interface, and this task isn't something that's happening for several months, I may not want to physically commit their task to the schedule. But it is important, and I still want their schedule to appear as open, that just in case something else pops up that's more time sensitive. So it's allowing me to say it's kind of tentative. When we get a booking, this is where the resource has been officially allocated to the task. So when we get closer to the date of the task, that we tentatively plan for, a booking then would be created that basically physically blocks off that time on our developer schedule, so that way they cannot be scheduled for anything else. So remember, we have assignment, that is just, we're saying tentatively, booking versus it's going to happen and it's on the calendar. But before we can actually assign our resources to projects, we need to understand who will be responsible for assigning those resources. So project operations supports two different modes to assist you kind of with that booking flow. First, we have that central mode. And this is where the project manager basically says, here are the requirements for the resource I need. And then the resource manager is going to go out and find qualified resources and propose them to the project manager. The project manager then accepts or rejects those resources that were provided and proposed by the resource manager. On the other hand, you have an option called the hybrid mode. And as you can see on the lower level of this chart here, both the project manager and the resource manager can find and book resources. But the mode that you choose is going to be an organizational or project-based choice. I wouldn't say one's better than the other. But you might find yourself asking, saying, wouldn't it be a little bit confusing with both assignments that are scheduled for in the future and bookings that you have that are confirmed? And you know what? You're right. If you don't watch out and you're not monitoring this closely, it is totally possible that you might overbook or underbook a single resource. And so what project managers can use is what's called the reconciliation tab in project operations to reconcile bookings and assignments for project teams. The reconciliation tab also shows all the bookings and assignments down to the level of the individual task assignment for each of your team members. And since each of your resources have some type of billable utilization, you're going to want to be able to calculate it and see how they're performing. But keep in mind, not all utilization is billable. So you can actually filter the view on the schedule board. That way you're targeting your desired utilization type. And if you look here on the screen, you can see that utilization is pretty to understand since it uses the green, yellow, red color coding. But really, at the end of the day, since managing project resources is a daily task, it's important that you have what you need to identify and schedule correctly based on those project task needs. And with that, we're at the end of our module and at the end of our session for today. I really hope that you found this helpful, and I hope you were able to take away a new nugget of information that's gonna help you back in your daily job. But since you've already dedicated the time to attend both sessions for this class, I really recommend and hope that you at least take a stab at the MB 910 exam. It's going to cover all the same information that we reviewed in these last two sessions. And since it's a fundamentals course, you only really need to focus on identifying and describing different components of the customer engagement apps that we have inside of Dynamics 365. And in my opinion, between this course and the learning path, everything at aka.ms/MB910 has what you need to be successful to pass the exam. And as for the exam itself, you can expect right around 40 questions, give or take a few. And in order to pass the exam, you're going to need to score a minimum of 700 out of 1,000 points. Now, the way that you earn points is by answering questions correctly. You do not lose points for incorrect answers. So the best piece of advice I can offer is make sure that you read all the question, you read all of the answers before choosing one. And because of the way that the test is structured, you're gonna have 45 minutes to take the exam, and you don't need to rush through. There aren't gonna be any labs on the exam, and all of the questions are gonna be focused around the concepts that we've discussed. You might see multiple choice questions, true, false, matching, fill in the blank. Maybe you have to pick out from a word bank, but everything's going to be pretty high level since this is a fundamentals course. But I actually think that's everything that you need to know for the exam. Again, review any areas that you might be unsure about with that learning path at aka.ms/MB910. And once you get your shiny new badge, make sure that you're sharing on LinkedIn so your entire network can celebrate with you. Good luck on your exam if you're planning on taking it, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and hopefully we'll be celebrating your new badge soon or seeing you in another class. Bye, everyone.